Yeah, the whole team, the whole e-discovery team.
They've gone down now. 5.
Hi everyone, we're just waiting for a few people to join and then we'll get started. Thanks for joining us today. Just see the numbers going up a little bit. So we're just going to wait for a few people to join. We're not even at the hour yet, so everyone's nice and early. Give people just a couple of minutes to get started. Thanks for joining, everybody. We're just waiting for a few people to join, and then we'll get started. Just give everyone a couple more minutes to join. And we'll get started in a minute or so. Okay, I think we'll get started. Can see the numbers still going up a little bit, but just to say thank you very much for joining us. Today's session is the latest in our Diligence 2030 series. The sessions look at investigations techniques in the kind of sort of sphere of private investigations in the context of legal firms. So this time we're focusing on the role that technology plays in investigations because that's very much part of our world. I'm joined by some expert panel members today, and I'll get them to introduce themselves shortly. If you want to get in contact with any of the speakers directly, please do click on the resources tab down below, and you'll be taken to their bios and contact details. And there will be a recording for the session for everyone that signed up, which is great. If anyone's missing it, and we will be taking questions at the end. Please do feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom to submit these, not the chat function, if you please. Right, so technology, it's always formed a major part of investigations, and from the birth of fingerprint analysis in the early 20th century, mobile phone analysis in the late 20th century, social media analysis, these have all been sort of milestones in the use of technology. And nowadays we're looking at things like the use of drones and AI. But as with all forms of evidence and intelligence, technology has to be employed with due regard to legality and an understanding of how it works, and critically its limitations, because I think there's a common misconception that technology can solve all your problems. It can't, and you can't get from A to B without knowing how to drive. So equally, if you don't have a foundational understanding of blockchain technology, you can't conduct a cryptocurrency tracing exercise. It's my view that over-reliance on technology can lead to imperfect assessments, erroneous judgments, intelligence failures, and of course, in the worst case, a miscarriage of justice. In this session, we're going to explore just a few aspects of the use of tech in modern investigations, hearing from e-discovery and our reputation teams as well, who use technology and also come up against technology in their investigations. So thanks for joining us, and I'm looking forward to an engaging and informative session. So my name is Mark Tibbs. I'm a partner in the cyber risk and complex investigations practice within Mishcon de Reya. I'm joined by Richard and Hazel. Richard.
Good afternoon. So my name is Richard Legg. So I run the firm's standalone e-discovery business called MDR Discover, and I'm also a partner in Mishcon de Reya. Thank you very much.
Hi there, I'm Hazel Braden. I'm a managing associate in the reputation protection and crisis management team at Mishcon, and I'm a lawyer.
Oh yes, I should say I'm not a lawyer, neither is Richard. We're both not lawyers. Just in case. Yes. Okay. Thanks very much, guys. Hazel, do you want to lead us in with the first topic?
Yeah, of course. So the first topic that we wanted to talk about was new technology and investigations. So as Mark touched upon, technology really is revolutionizing investigations. So we've got the growth of social media and the rise of open source intelligence. And this all means that a significant amount of data and information can be found online. And more recently, AI tools have introduced new and more creative ways of discovering and analysing evidence. So my questions for you, Mark and Richard, are, in your opinions, what technologies have most impacted investigations over the past few years, and how can new technology complement the more traditional investigative methods that we've used?
Sure, thanks, Hazel. So I think within the e-discovery world, I think over the last 10, 15 years, actually, we've seen like some pretty significant changes. It started around 10 years ago when they started to introduce text analytics, or some of you may know it as predictive coding, into the document review platforms. And the main advantage with that technology, obviously, was that the main thrust was to reduce the amount of irrelevant material that needs to be sifted through by lawyers, paralegals, and obviously that's all done at a massive cost to the client. And the other problem with that solution was it's still a bag of words solution in the sense that it's only able to compare documents that based on their textual contents. And it would basically therefore suggest documents which are most likely to be relevant based on prior coding decisions. I think it's clear now in the e-discovery space, especially, we are on the precipice of another massive change in the way that we identify and review documents, because we are starting to see the introduction of Gen AI capabilities into the review platforms. And obviously, you may think, why is it taking so long for these technologies to be introduced when obviously the advantage is so apparent? The initial problem was around the security and the client data and the public domain, etc. And a lot of those concerns have now been addressed in the sense that the client data will stay within your secure perimeter. And then the other problem was, obviously, we deal with vast volumes of documents in the e-discovery space. So we need to be able to analyze all those documents in a sensible, realistic sense to kind of get the investigator, the reviewers, to the relevant documents. So with the introduction of Gen AI into these platforms, we're now going to go into a new age where we're going to have lawyers crafting prompts, etc. And those prompts will obviously help the lawyers to identify the key documents in a much more swift fashion. And it's really going to, I think, change the way in which we do these reviews. But I think it's also important at this point to know, I think this is not some kind of magic wand that we're going to wave over the document sets and it's going to complete our view. It's basically, the way we see it here, it's basically going to act as an assistant in the reviews, and it's basically going to help the investigators or reviewers to locate that relevant information as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I mean, while Richard's talking about sort of, I guess, reviewing internal documents and looking at, a data set that might be private, a lot of our work is around looking outside, looking externally to find information. So I think AI is certainly a game changer, and we'll talk about that in the next topic as well. But I'd argue that in many ways it's an extension of a tech trend that's been changing investigations for several years. So it's the use of automation, it's the internet, it's the digitization of information, both public and what used to be private, which is probably the biggest impact in the last 20 years on investigations that I've seen as well. Because it used to be the case that if you wanted to know something about someone's background, some of your sources would be restricted to very manual methods, human sources, news media. You might have to go to public archives stored on a microfiche in a local library. Now, thankfully, a lot of that information is digitized and available to search. But you can find, I would argue, you can find information around maybe most internet users, just based on information they've published about themselves on social media, or that's been published about them by other sources, or that's been leaked about them from hacking attacks, or news websites or blogs. All of this is made for a much more interesting, a much more available set of information for investigators. So, yeah, and much of this detection of the information is aided by automation. So the use of things like data mining tools that exploit information stored on databases, etc. So to me, that's the key change in the last 20 years, is that digitization and obviously the birth of the internet. But that's not to say that traditional sources are not still extremely useful. So I think you should be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater and not focus entirely on internet sources of information or digital sources of information, because we all know that a well-placed human source, like a former employee or a business associate, will obviously know more information about an entity which is not obvious from public sources. So it's the seeds of that kind of information combined with powerful search tools in the classic intelligence cycle that will lead to the best results, in my view.
Great, thank you. And then topic 2, so we wanted to talk about AI and investigations. So the development of AI is often surrounded by quite a lot of fear and misconceptions. Certainly us as lawyers are worried about it, but it does hold significant potential for enhancing investigative work. So my question to you are, what are the practical applications of AI in private investigations, and how can we seek to demystify common misconceptions about its use?
Thanks, Hazel. I think for the large language model, or LLMs, you'll no doubt be more familiar with their more common names of ChatGPT or OpenAI, etc. I think one of the biggest concerns that especially we've had internally or clients have is that, where will this data eventually reside? Will it be used to improve, the large language models' functionality? But I think most of these kind of security issues have been addressed now, and then we obviously were able to keep the data within our secure perimeter. And then there's also this widely known misconception, well, not a misconception, these things do have the ability to do it, but it's around hallucination and providing false answers when you're crafting your prompts and the answers that it gives you. The integration of these tools into the e-discovery space is to try to address those problems as best as possible. And it's trying to eliminate the hallucinations, etc. as well. And it's like I said before, I don't think this isn't some kind of silver bullet that we're just going to let the LLM do all of the work in terms of carrying out our review. We're still needing lawyers and investigators working alongside the platform to sit there and verify the results and make sure it's doing exactly as you intend it to do.
Yeah. So private LLMs, which don't share training data, are quite clearly a fantastic tool. When they're used with the correct prompts and the results scrutinized, I'd argue. So I agree with Richard. It's not going to replace the human mind, but I think it is certainly going to speed it up, and it's certainly going to mean that investigators can be more effective in a shorter amount of time. So we use AI to summarize complex legal documents, to structure unstructured data. So what it's done is it's allowed a user that isn't necessarily particularly technical to perform technical tasks that previously would have required coding knowledge, for example. And what I've said about sort of structuring unstructured data, or even actually coding, writing code to be able to perform some sort of investigative task. That is the sort of thing that that's the power that comes with an LLM, which is obviously very beneficial. And I think the point about hallucinations, well, it's not a different challenge in many ways to misinformation, which we'll talk about later on, or information false positives or anything like that, where it requires a sort of very complex set of scrutiny, scrutinization of the results. We wouldn't take intelligence that we'd found online at face value. We'd seek to corroborate it. We'd seek to understand the source. All those things still hold up for using any tool, I would argue, and that includes large LLMs, So in particular, I guess my main message is, like, I wouldn't over rely on these kind of technologies, and I would consider them, and we do consider them a useful tool, but they are not a replacement for a human, and they're not a replacement for human analysis. And then I suppose the other sort of big kind of application of AI in our world is the use of facial recognition technology. So there are, for example, websites that will allow you to identify people's faces from images, and obviously there's an awful lot of data protection kind of concerns around the use of these, but they are certainly going to be used in investigations, particularly where there's a lawful purpose to use them. And we've had examples where we're looking to understand who someone is from an online photograph they posted themselves, and these kind of tools are very useful for identifying sort of blogs. We had identity of a fraudster uncovered through the use of facial recognition technology. So I think my key message with all these things is make sure you do your DD before accepting investigations or investigators that will use these tools to ensure you understand how they approach it, how they approach the technology, how they approach the data protection issues, and get comfortable that there's sufficient human oversight. So I'd be asking a few questions, basically, is what I'm saying.
Right. Thanks, Mark. So our third topic is hacking and cryptocurrency investigations. And as we all know, bank heists, they're so 1990s. All of the biggest frauds and robberies that are being achieved now, they're being done through cybercrime. Ransomware and digital theft cause millions of pounds of losses worldwide. Sometimes they call, irreparable damages to operations and reputation. So, question for Mark and Hazel is something. Can you tell us about your experience with crypto and hacking cases and the use of tech in these?
Sure. So, I mean, another part of my role is within investigating cyber incidents, and by their very nature, hacking cases they are achieved at least partly through the use of new technology, typically, or technology, for example. So it's very often new technology which has had some sort of hole or vulnerability that's been exploited, which is the initial access point, the initial kind of like point of attack in one of these cases. So these kind of crimes are only possible because of the new technology and the new software that they exploit. So in the world of cybercrime, top crime groups, they benefit from this sort of virtual arms race where you've got researchers that are constantly looking for vulnerabilities, and then you've got attackers who are looking to use them, and then you've also got people trying to defend against them. So there's a whole underground market. You can purchase code to do this, etc. It's very interesting. I find it very interesting. But in my team's world, sort of keeping up to date with these new vulnerabilities and exploits helps us to protect our clients from cyber attacks. It also helps us understand how intrusions and thefts happen. So yeah, very much part of my role is kind of understanding new technology and understand how it's exploited. And then in terms of cryptocurrency, which is favored by cyber criminals, I'm not saying it's the only use of cryptocurrencies. As we know that cryptocurrencies have got way more legitimate uses, but it is a favored tool for cyber criminals because of its kind of semi anonymous features, I guess. And it's the discovery of Bitcoin and its successes which kind of oiled the wheels of cybercrime and allowed for quick and easy theft and laundering of proceeds of crime. So in our team, yeah, we frequently assist our fraud disputes with the tracing of cryptocurrencies across the blockchain to understand likely exit points, and working with lawyers like Hazel to get legal orders to disclose information, for example. But we had one case I'll share with you, which was an international hacking case where a suspect had stolen some digital data from their victim using an exploit. This is a piece of code that's designed to take advantage of a vulnerability, and they were identified as an individual in the UK and we were able to also identify about $1 million worth of assets in cryptocurrency from their use of a vanity domain. So, and this eventually has had some police action against it now. So these kind of crimes were not even conceivable perhaps 15 years ago, 10 years ago, but now they're actually conceivable and they're solvable through the use of we use cryptocurrency tracing software to help us with those investigations, and open sources in this case as well.
Yeah, and in the reputation team, so we've worked for prominent individuals whose personal data, including their photos or their financial information, might have been accessed or hacked. So there was obviously the big iCloud hack that happened a few years ago, and it could have been shared online or with third parties. And the nature of our instruction is we usually work with Mark's team to investigate the source of the hack. And then it might be a case of sending takedown requests to sites and third parties. It could be privacy notices or copyright notices. And we'll work with third parties, including the authorities, like where required. And then in terms of companies, we've acted for companies who have been the victim of breaches or hacks and also extortion attempts. So that includes ransomware demands. And the first step in any investigation is to secure the data. So that's where we'll work with Mark's team. And then also to ensure that there is a ring of confidentiality and privilege and a safe way to communicate whilst the investigation is ongoing. It's also essential to ensure that the cyber incident response protocol is actually being followed. All actions are being logged because timing is really crucial during the first few hours and days of an attack. And then also depending on the severity of the data accessed, what's been taken and other factors, including, jurisdiction, it can involve reporting to regulators, customers or clients, and working with comms teams to prepare public statements, if this is something that's going to be picked up in the press. But it's really crucial that individuals and companies are prepared for the worst, that there's ongoing training in place, that there's also regular cyber incident simulations. And that's something that we work with companies and also individuals to review their protocols and also prepare them for these types of attacks.
Thank you very much. So our last topic is around misinformation and disinformation. I think it's, we all know it's a sad fact that the spread of misinformation and disinformation campaigns is increasing online worldwide. Harmful actors able to spread falsities quickly and cheaply, primarily obviously on social media. So question for Mark and Ezra, can you talk us through some experience you have of supporting victims of these kinds of campaigns and the role that technology plays in these?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. This is an example of where technology has been used against us, really. So, or against our clients, and we see the intentional publishing of data, which is malicious. Online smear campaigns or sort of malicious PR campaigns, they might be called, and they're a common issue. We see them cropping up again and again, and typically they're sort of facilitated by kind of organized groups as well, I would argue. So we're looking at networks that have been established and infrastructure. This is sort of internet infrastructure that's been established in order to publish false stories, in order to besmirch the reputation of individuals. It can be strategic. It can be part of a PR campaign to support litigation against someone. It can just be sort of revenge. We've seen as well all sorts of things like that. And we're in the business of helping Hazel and her team, and I think Hazel will talk a little bit more about how they help their clients through these kind of incidents. But yeah, so it's the amplification, it's the search engine optimization, and sort of unpicking these, which requires a specific set of skills and knowledge, I'd argue, including sort of digital forensics, legal expertise, deep understanding of how things operate, a deep understanding of how people will try and remain anonymous online, and sort of unmasking these kind of trolls. There are tools that are available to understand if these networks are false personas. There are characteristics of social media that sometimes make it extremely obvious. Things like the inorganic growth in followers, to understand what you're dealing with. But again, it's about a level of experience within your investigations team to be able to unpick and understand that. And also, I'd say there's, with these cases, the sort of use of technology to help with them. It's not just about, I've mentioned data mining tools, and we use those as well, but there's also sort of monitoring tools that will help flag any changes. So, for example, new domains or new IP addresses, or new social media accounts, or new tweets, whatever it might be, because it's a dynamic and often very fast-moving and changing environment. And so whereas an individual kind of investigation will provide a snapshot, sometimes our clients require us to understand the changing picture as well around these kind of cases, so that we can react really quickly. Also, we're proactively able to kind of address the issues and try and get infrastructure taken down, for example.
Yeah, and I'd add to that just taking a step back, it's important to understand the distinction in these campaigns. So whilst misinformation is false or inaccurate information that might be spread innocently without an intent to deceive, disinformation campaigns are deliberate and they cause, serious harm to not only the individuals and companies which are victims or targeted of these, but also democracy itself. And we saw this in the riots in England, and also the mistruths that were spread about political candidates in the lead up to the July election. And we regularly act for individuals, companies, and charities in helping to combat both types of campaigns. And the specific strategic approach really depends on a number of factors. So, what is the nature of the information being spread? Who might be behind it? Which platforms or publishers are hosting the information? Which jurisdictions are caught? And who is reading the information? And what ultimately are the risks of engaging with publishers or bad actors? As Mark said, the strategy really is multifaceted, and it often involves a combination of legal action, external digital providers, and specialist PR experts. And it might include, rather than going to the source and writing to someone who is publishing these myth truths, who probably would relish that and would love the oxygen that a public fight could bring. It could be that you work with external providers to amplify truthful content to counterbalance the proliferation of false information. And in terms of social media platforms and publishers, some are quicker or slower than others to respond to takedown requests. And a key consideration is, what are the legal tools that are actually available to the client? And does it meet the threshold for a claim? Does it breach their terms and conditions? Is there a privacy complaint here? And actually, is this something that's better escalated to the authorities if a criminal offence has occurred? And then in the UK, we have, since last year, the introduction of the Online Safety Act, but it hasn't really, taken effect yet, as in we're not getting the impact that we hoped. But hopefully in time, there will be greater protections against disinformation campaigns in the UK, whilst also preserving freedom of expression rights that are so key in our society.
Thanks, Hazel. I think we probably just got time for maybe one question. So I've got one question here about how has the use of drones impacted investigations? And I think probably it's me that has to answer that one, isn't it? So, so drones, yeah, they are used by some investigators to collect information to do surveillance. There's a specific set of rules and legislation that cover drones. GDPR, sort of data protection is still key. So people's sort of expectation of privacy is still key, but that it's the same sort of legislation that guides traditional surveillance as well. There are also some licensing requirements, I think, from the CAA, for example. So I guess again, it's the same message is if you're working with investigators who are using these kind of methods, using drones, then just to make sure that you understand how they're approaching it, how they're approaching the legality of it, the proportionality of it, and yeah, are they licensed? Can they show, can they prove that? Just a little bit of DD is my advice. So I think that draws us nicely to the end of our session. Thank you very much to Hazel and Richard for your insights. If you've got any outstanding questions, we will answer them by email. There'll be a recording of the session sent to everyone who signed up, and our contact details. So thank you very much. And again, if you want to get in contact with any of us directly, please click on the resources tab down below, and you'll be taken to their bios, everyone's bios and contact details. All right. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.